I'm writing this because I seriously don't know what to do. For those of you who are reading, who needs to understand the situation I'm in, I'll start from the beginning. My name is Alec. I'm an 18-year-old man who lived a pretty average life. My parents let me live in our summer home free of charge, so I lived pretty comfortable with my dog Roxy. Everything changed ever since I applied for a dishwashing job at the new pizza place that just opened down the block. I recently got laid off due to my old workplace being overstaffed. I just needed a quick job to get my life back in gear. I opened the door to see a man I never seen before. He was in a blue mailman uniform and he had a thick mustache. He was about the same height as me. I looked at him as he reached in his bag to hand me the daily paper. I thanked him and waved him off. He smiled as he turned around and walked to his vehicle. I let go of Roxy's collar. She wasn't really the people type of dog. She ran back to the door and started lightly barking. Already knowing the stranger was gone, I walked over to the coffee pot with the newspaper in my hand. I read some of the headlines while the coffee maker poured the breakfast blend coffee. The paper contained the usual what not is always had. Missing dog ads, how the government shouldn't be in the office, all useless information to me. The coffee pot finished and I picked up my mug. I threw the paper onto the table and pulled out the sugar and creamer. I prepared my coffee and took a sit at the table. Roxy hopped on to the other chair the table had. She liked to enjoy the mornings with me, and I really didn't mind her sitting on the chair. I read an article about the recent effect of global warming. It wasn't really that interesting. Out of nowhere, Roxy jumped onto the table and spilled my coffee all over me. "Roxy, get down, now!" I slightly raised my voice. She quickly hopped down and whimpered at me. I ignored her and picked up my coffee mug. The coffee basically spread everywhere, so I tried to dry the paper the best I could. The only place on the paper that was dry was this ad for a job. Since I was recently laid off, I read into the job. Dishwasher needed. Johnny Boy's Pizza is now hiring. I wasn't really interested in the whole dishwashing thing, so I used a pair of scissors to cut out the ad and I put it on my fridge. The type of job I was looking for was high paying and easygoing, but I would take any high paying job. After wiping my table, I decided to clean my kitchen. I cleared the counters and washed the dishes. Roxy whined at me multiple times. While I was scrubbing, it started to get on my nerves. I looked over at her and noticed she was whining because she had no food in her little dog bowl. "Oh, I'm sorry, Roxy. Let me fill that up for you immediately." I pet her head slightly. I walked over to the closet and gave it a tug. The stupid thing gets stuck every now and then. The closet opened up and I reached for the dog food. I lifted up the bag. It was empty. I looked around in the closet and there was no other bags of dog food. I sighed as I closed the door and reached into my pocket. $20 was all I had. I looked down at Roxy, who was still whining. I patted my leg, and she came towards me. I picked her up and placed her on the couch. I walked into my bedroom and picked out a casual outfit. I slid it onto my body. I walked over to the couch and picked Roxy up. I grabbed my car keys from the little island countertop near the entrance of the house, and I walked outside. I made sure to lock the door as I exited. I didn't want some weirdo in my house when I returned. I put Roxy in the passenger seat of my car and I got in the driver's seat. I started my car, slowly watching the gas gauge. I had nearly no gas in my car. Shit, this money was for gas. I slapped my head in anger and I drove off. I arrived at the gas station. I handed the cashier the 20 I had in my wallet. 10 on pump 2 please, I kindly asked the cashier. She tapped the cash register for a second and handed me my 10. I thanked her and left. I filled my car up with little to no gas. I stepped into my car where Roxy was waiting and drove to the closest Addie's. When I arrived, I found the cheapest bag of dog food, which was only £3, but enough to feed Roxy for the day. I checked out and hopped into my car again. Roxy and I headed home, passing by some fast food restaurants and a Walmart. Roxy and I got home around 3 p.m. As I walked in the door, Roxy started barking. The only reason why Roxy would be barking is if someone was in the house. I slowly opened the door, creeping inside. I looked in the washroom. Thankfully, no one was in there. I slowly crept up the hallway, Roxy at my side. We arrived at the kitchen. We saw a man standing next to the table. "Who the hell are you? And why are you in my house?" I shouted at the man. "Oh, Mr. Alec, it's me, the mailman from earlier. It seems that your newspaper was damaged, so I brought you a new one. I didn't want to scare you, so I waited in your house," the mailman said in a kind voice. "Okay, first off, you could have left the paper on my porch. And second off, how did you get into my house?" I was genuinely confused. I made sure the door was locked when I left the house. "That doesn't matter, young fellow. I just wanted to make sure you got your newspaper safely. I shall head out now." The mailman walked by me and tapped me on the shoulder. "Oh, and one more thing, Mr. Alec. You should call that pizza place," he chuckled, and then left my house. I sat down absolutely confused. How did this man get into my house? Why did he bring me a new newspaper? How did he know my newspaper got ruined? There was too many questions floating around my head. Roxy noticed my confusion and came to sit with me. She had already finished the food I brought her. I sighed and stood up. I made my way to the refrigerator and pulled the dishwashing ad off the fridge. I examined the paper and saw the $200 sign on bonus. I immediately pulled out my phone and called the number.
"Johnny Boy's Pizza, how can I help you?"
A young voice spoke from the phone. "Hi, I saw your ad on the paper and I would like to apply for the job." I tried my best to sound cheerful about this opportunity.
"1 second, sir."
The boy put me on hold. The phone played a jingle. Suddenly, a man's voice arose from the phone.
"Hello, I am the manager of this place. I hear you would like to apply for the dishwashing job."
The man sounded like a nice guy. "I saw your advertisement in the paper and I was really interested. Do you need my details?" I calmly asked the man.
"Don't worry about that at all. Just come by around 9 p.m. That's when we close. You can start today."
The man said in an excited voice. "That works with me perfectly. I'll see you then, Mr.
Brian."
The man cut me off. He hung up the phone. I looked at Roxy all excited that I could start working tonight. I prepared some quick lunch and sat down with Roxy. I finished eating and set my alarm for 8 p.m. I laid down on the couch and closed my eyes. Roxy jumped onto my chest and lay down on top of me. We both dozed off. I suddenly awoke from the noise of my alarm clock blaring. I turned it off and woke up Roxy, who lightly jumped off my chest and shook her fur. I stood up and wiped my eyes and made sure all of my functions were working before walking towards the bathroom. I took a nice 10-minute shower and got dressed. I pet Roxy on her head and left. I locked the door and hopped in my car. The drive to work was silent and calm. The night sky always made me smile. I arrived at the place. It was a small building with a huge inflatable little boy holding a pizza. I tried to walk in the front door but noticed a small note on the door. "Alec, please come in through the back door." Mr. Bryan. I opened the back door. It was a quiet screech as it passed into the storage area of the kitchen. A tall, skinny man was waiting for me in the room. He reached out his hand. I shook it. "You must be Mr. Bryan. Nice to meet you." I released my hand from his palm. "Ah, yes. It's nice to meet you too, Alec. Let me show you around." Mr. Bryan motioned forward. The restaurant was empty. It seemed like all the workers were home early. The place was medium-sized. He showed me how to use the mop and dishwashing machine. He showed me where the majority of the dishes went and led me into the office. "After you're done with your dishes, you will be required to stay another 2 hours. Our clock-out machine is broken and has this delay on it. You have special permission to stay here and use the computer until you leave, though. Just keep an eye on the security cameras." He patted me on the back and led me back to the storage area. "Well, that seems to be all, Alec. You will be in charge of wiping counters, mopping, and doing the dishes. I better get going, though. The wife is waiting." He chuckled a bit before turning. "Oh, I almost forgot. Here is the list of rules you'll have to follow. Take your phone out and take a picture of it for me. Sometimes it gets vandalized overnight." He gave me a serious look and then patted me on the back and left the building. I took out the phone and took a picture of the list of rules. I then read them off the list. They were written in a very nice handwriting and it looked very professional. The rules were very strange though. Rule 1. Finish mopping and washing the dishes between the hours 9 to 12. If the water is running past 12 a.m., find somewhere to hide until you hear the back door close. You don't want him to find you. If the floor is still wet, you will bring a guest. If the floor is still wet, he will bring a guest. Same with the dishes not being finished. If both of those are not done, pray that he will only bring one guest. Rule 2. If someone comes into the restaurant asking for a guy named Robert, tell the man that he is not here. If that doesn't send him on his way, then tell him you will go get Robert. Then don't look at the man again until you hear the front bell ring. Rule 3. If you hear a scratching noise coming from the window, cook a pizza and place it on the window sill. If you don't do this in 10 minutes, it will get in. Rule 4. Between the hours 12 to 2, if you hear cheering in the dining room, check the cameras. If no one is there, don't go out. But if a woman and her son are out there, go out and tell them happy birthday. If you don't go out there, I hope that you don't have any pets. Rule 5. If you feel the heat in the kitchen suddenly rise, go into the freezer for 3 minutes. Rule 6. If the freezer ventilation is open, lock the freezer and don't open it for the rest of the night. If Rule 5 happens when the freezer is locked, go outside and wait 3 minutes again. Rule 7. If you hear a little girl crying from inside the locked storage shed, unlock it until you hear the crying. If you hear laughter, take the extra lock from the top of the shed and lock the other door. Rule 8. If an old woman walks back into the kitchen, ignore her and don't pay her any mind. She doesn't like being watched as she is cooking. Rule 9. If any of these rules seem different than before, look at the picture you took on your phone. Rule 9. If any of the rules seem different than before, look at the picture you took on your phone. If you follow any of the changed rules, you won't be able to go home. Rule 10. If something calling itself a police officer asks you to open the back door, ignore it for 1 minute. If they continue knocking, run to the office and turn on the outside light. If you turn on the outside light before the first minute is done, hide underneath the desk. Rule 11. After your shift, make sure the chef coming in for the night shift is human. If you let something else pretending to be the chef in, it will be your fault that the people ordering food die. Rule 12. If you leave before the chef arrives, the creature from Rule 3 will have a midnight snack. Please sign here before continuing. I laughed. Is this some kind of strange joke for the new recruit? I reread the rules and laughed out loud. I can't believe they tried to trick me with this type of joke. I signed the list of rules on the pizza making counter and started to wash the dishes. I was about halfway done when I heard a noise coming from the window. I looked over and nothing seems to be there. For 2 minutes, the little sound continued. I dropped a pan of water and walked over to the window. A small scratching sound was coming from it. That's strange, I silently said to myself. I walked back over to the sink. On my way there, I caught a glance at the rules. Rule 3. If you hear scratching, next 10 minutes. I didn't think anything on the list would happen at all. I wasn't testing my fate, I swear to myself, and opened the pizza topping shelf. I prepared a quick pepperoni pizza. I looked at the cheat sheet. It takes 10 minutes to make a pizza. I slid the pizza in the oven and looked at the time, 10:30. It had been 3 minutes since the scratching began. My hand started shaking after thinking about what would happen if the thing scratching the window got into the building. The pizza oven timer rang out and I quickly pulled the pizza out of the oven. I ran over to the window and put the pizza down. I looked at my watch and the clock had landed on 10:40. Nothing happened. "Thank you, mister," a creepy voice called out. I looked at the window and saw a small hand that looked like veins pull the pizza pan out of the window. I was genuinely scared. This whole set of rules wasn't a joke. I closed the window and walked back to the dishwashing machine. My mind was still trying to find out what was going on. Nothing happened for a little while. I finished washing and putting the dishes away and started to mop the floor. My body continued to get hotter as I mopped the floor. I realized this was the work of Rule 5. I walked into the freezer. I looked around and saw nothing of normal. I walked in. That was when I realized the ventilation gate is open. I closed the door and locked it. Something started to bang on the door. I stepped back in fear. The temperature rose more and more, and I made my way towards the back door. I walked out and slanted my body against the wall. The coolness of the fresh air felt nice. I looked at my watch, 11:40. Shit, I have to finish mopping the... Before I could finish my sentence, I heard a little girl weeping. I went to the storage crate and put my ear to the right door. The girl was weeping alright. I took the keys out of my pocket and unlocked the door. The weeping continued for another minute, until it stopped. I closed the door and locked it again. I ran back in after 3 minutes concluded, and I quickly finished the mopping. I turned off all the water sources and wiped down the counters. I heard the back door screech open. I looked over to see the old woman entering the back door. She looked like she was in her 70s. As she walked by, she gave me a wave and started cooking. I gave her a quick glance. Her face was spitting out some green liquid and there was an eyeball on the pan. I almost puked at the sight of it. I wanted to get out of here. I needed to get out of here. I thought about leaving, but then I remembered that what would happen if I didn't finish my shift. I walked into the office and tried to cool myself down. I looked at Busty Girls on the office computer. I know it sounds perverted, but I just needed a quick calm. At about 12:20, I looked up at the cameras. The place was empty, thank God. It stayed that way until 1:12, but I heard the cheering from the dining room. I looked up at the camera and saw nothing. The camera turned left and right. I already didn't see anything, so I continued my shift. 1:30. I had 30 minutes left on my shift. I sighed in relief. I looked up at the camera and saw the strange creature. Nothing about this was on the list of rules. It had a cartoony butterfly face. It seemed more disturbing though. It just stared into the camera. I tried to ignore it, but it just stayed there. It didn't move, it just kept its creepy smiling face in front of the camera. I tried to get my mind off the thing, but the ever-staring face of this creature stayed in the corner of my eye. I started up a YouTube video about dogs and started to finally relax. I looked at the time, 1:56. Finally, I said to myself in a sigh of relief. I looked at the door and saw the same creature staring at me through the crack in the door. I jumped back at the sight of it. I checked my watch and it still had 3 minutes left on my shift. Cold sweat ran down my back as the creature continued to stare. I looked around the room. There was nowhere to hide. My body began to shake as the office door started to creak open. I started to put myself under the desk. That's when I saw the chef walking from the front door on the camera. The creature disappeared as he walked in through the kitchen door. I walked out and greeted him. He was tall, bald. I remembered what the rules said. I chuckled to myself as he looked human to me, but I had to be cautious. Hey, I know this is odd, but what is the password? The boss told me to ask you this when I arrived. I looked at the man in his eyes. A password, huh? Well, I never heard of that, but I can show you my ID. The chef handed me his driver's license. Looks real to me. We both laughed and waved as I walked out the door. I got into my car and opened my phone. It had a picture of the list of rules on the screen. I looked at the picture one final time and saw that there was an option to sign the paper. I looked at it again and it was definitely not there. Is this rule 9? Did I break it? I started driving home thinking of what could happen if I broke the rule. It said I wouldn't be able to go home. Well, I'm heading home now, so I couldn't have broken the rule, right? By the time I got to my house, I was in a complete panic. I rocked in my house, waiting for Roxy to make me feel better. But she never came. I called her name over and over. She didn't come again. I turned on the light to my kitchen, and everything seemed fine. I walked into the living room and turned on the lights. All I saw was Roxy's corpse on the floor, in a pool of blood. I ran over to her, tears coming down my face as I realized she wasn't breathing. My heart was pounding, and my head was spinning.
Why do I deserve this? I screamed out loud. Besides Roxy was a business card. I picked it up, still shaking and crying. The business card said, "Happy birthday." I looked around, looking for an open window or anything, and that's when I saw it. The creature was staring at me through my own living room window. I stood frozen, not knowing what to do. A knock at my door unfreezed my body and I ran to my room. The creature was already staring at me through the window of my bedroom. I closed the blinds and sat at my desk. Now I'm writing this still, not knowing what to do. I didn't know what rule I broken. I know I can't leave my house. My desire to go back to Johnny Boy's is getting bigger and bigger as time goes on. The creature keeps on toying with me, and the only place I feel safe is Johnny Boy's. A knock started to come from the window the creature was staring from. I slightly opened the blinds to see the creature staring directly at me. It opened its mouth.
Mr. Alec, did you enjoy your new newspaper?